In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, Ryan Roxie here. Welcome to another podcast edition of In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie. Today we have, I think, a very worthy candidate of being in the trenches because he has been in the trenches. Would you please welcome to the show Mr. Steve Brown? Hello, Steve. What's up?
Hey, Ryan. How you doing? How you doing, everybody? Welcome to the show and greetings from sunny New Jersey.
I like the fact that we're doing this definitely intercontinental. It would be because, or transatlantic, because I'm in Stockholm, you're in Jersey, and just two guys talking about guitars, what it's like to make a living doing what you always wanted to do. I assume playing guitar and singing and making music is what you always wanted to do, correct?
Oh, without a doubt, since I was 8 years old, man. I got the bug after seeing Kiss and Van Halen in 1978, and it completely changed my life. And, 40 years later, here I am, healthy, happy, and pretty.
Man, so you have a very cool first concert. Was that your first one that you said? Is that the one that sort of made you light bulb moment?
Yeah, I mean, Kiss in 1970. Well, I say 1978 because that was the year that Kiss Rock and Roll Over was the first life-changing record for me, and then Van Halen 1. So both in 1978, and that's when I started playing guitar. And my first concert was Kiss, the original Kiss, 1979 at Madison Square Garden on the Dynasty Tour. And
Wow.
And then my second concert was Van Halen in 1982 on the Diver Down tour. So both those, first two concerts, first two rock records that I really, completely changed my life. And that was, I sold my soul to rock and roll in those years, for sure.
I see a running theme with a lot of the guys that we have on the show. Of course, most of the guys we have are guitar players thus far, but that first Van Halen record is a reoccurring theme of inspiration, right?
Oh, without question. I mean, you can't. I mean, for the type of music that I do and I think you love and what we grew up on, whether, Van Halen, Kiss, Cheap Trick, Def Leppard, Bond, all the great bands of that era, Van Halen 1, and still to this day, which is still amazing to me, and I was thinking about this before, every time I hear Eruption and I hear the first Van Halen record, I go, this record still sounds and holds up as good as it did in 1978. It was groundbreaking. It was like you didn't even know when you heard Eruption if that was a guitar or not. Yeah. It sounded like a video game. It was beyond comprehension. And still to this day, when I try to compare it to other things, in my opinion, Eruption is still the greatest guitar solo. No one's ever come close to topping it, even in this day of guitar players, where guitar playing, as you know and I know, has gone beyond the realm of guitar playing. Guys are so good and technically amazing, but no one has ever come close to bettering Eruption, in my opinion.
Wow, that's a great sell for Eruption as the new national anthem. It should probably be the new rock national anthem for sure.
Well, yeah, in a way, shape, or form, but definitely guitar playing.
And for those of you listening out there that are from the newer age, the new kids on the block that are picking up guitar and playing it, I know that myself, and I could probably speak for you, Steve, we learned Eruption the old-fashioned way. We scratched records. We basically took the needle off the vinyl before vinyl was hip again. And we actually ended up, I ruined a couple copies of Van Halen 1 trying to pick out Eruption, and I never did. We didn't have that smart little YouTube slowing down the pitch setting because we didn't friggin' have YouTube.
It's incredible, man. And I teach guitar. So I tell all my students, we're here and they want to learn stuff. And I just pull it up on YouTube and I go to them. I go, man, you have no idea how lucky you are. When I was a kid, it was slow down the record. Remember when we got 4 tracks and we were able to put the cassette in and slow that down? And I mean, the stuff that we would go through to learn stuff. Now everything is there. And, whether you have Guitar Pro, all these tab things, it's really in this day and age to learn guitar. And I think that's also why you see kids on YouTube who've only been playing a year and they go from 0 to 100 in a year. It's incredible. And, hey, man, it is what it is. And that's the beauty of it. It's great to see kids of this day and age really wanting to learn guitar and go so quickly to an incredible level of playing that we weren't able to do as kids. But, hey.
There's always a converse, though, Steve. I say this because as much as we have these tools and as much as there is YouTube and so much more of a community that where the learning curve can shoot up, there's also that many more things to do. When we were learning how to play guitar, it was what? It was soccer practice or playing the guitar. And that for me, that was the two things, totally. or maybe some Little League baseball. But, you know, you didn't have, 18 different types of video games to play any one given afternoon, or you didn't have 1,000,001 YouTube channels to go check out to learn anything you wanted to in the world, or we didn't have the option of seeing any movie ever made in our house.
You're right, man. I mean, that is the cool thing. And, thank God, like I tell everybody, listen, we grew up in the greatest time in the world, for music and I think in life in general, the 70s and 80s. I was born in 1970, AM radio in the 70s, some of the greatest music. I mean, I'm a huge soft rock fan, all those great bands of that era, the songwriting, the singing, the playing. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And then get into the hard rock in the 80s. I mean, dude, you were there before I was, and what an incredible time to grow up,
Well, we were there about the same time. You were just way younger because your band actually, with Trixter, I remember you guys coming out and everybody looking over their shoulder going, who are these kids rocking and rolling? Because they're really delivering. Do you think that Trixter, there was some early Van Halen influence, some AM radio influence? Did all those things go into Trixter?
It was all of it, man, and that was the cool thing for me, growing up. I was such a huge fan of music, whether it was my mom and dad listening to Fleetwood Mac, the Beatles, Elvis, Neil Diamond in my house, and then me, getting turned on to, like I said, Kiss and Van Halen so early. It was immediate. And I think Trixter and, the cool thing, what I learned very early on, and I don't know how I learned it, I think it was just fate. I learned very early on, along with learning how to play guitar and do all the cool Eddie Van Halen stuff and Ace Frehley and whatever. But I also learned how important the song was and songwriting. So right when I started playing guitar, right when I got good enough to do stuff, I started writing songs. Because I was like, this goes back to the vinyl era of looking at the credits on the record. And I would see, Rick Nielsen. I would see, written by Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, written by Eddie Van Halen, David Lee Roth, Michael Anthony, and Alex Van Halen. And, I didn't learn later on that those guys, Alex and Michael really didn't write the songs. But, I learned very early on songwriting as far as, and I learned that from reading songwriting credits. I'm like, man, I got to learn how to write songs. And I learned, like I think we all did, by basically copying the songs that we loved and taking parts. And, and some of them were really shitty. But then I stumbled on some things where I was like, hey, man, this is really cool. And, it was kind of a combination of all my influences, and I've never been shy about saying, hey, man, Trixter was a combination of Van Halen, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, every influence I ever had written on my sleeve. And it was all that, and whether it was ever that good, no, it was, in my opinion, never that good. But it was Trixter, for better or worse. It was my songs, my style, know?
Exactly. Well, you mentioned a couple of those bands that you were influenced. How surreal or cool is it that years later you end up jamming with those bands and playing gigs as a member of some of those bands. Most notably Def Leppard, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's
You cite them as an influence, and all of a sudden you're on stage with them rocking.
Sure.
We'll get back to that a little bit. I kind of want to go
Yeah.
a little bit more chronological because you're talking about learning guitar and learning songs first. As a teacher, I always try to get some sort of golden ticket knowledge from you guys that play guitar, that if you could give it to some other aspiring guitar player, what would be one of the first and mostly important things that you would tell someone to learn on the guitar? Would it be their power chords? Would it be their first position chords? Or would it be a lick on their notes? What advice did you give for someone learning? Because I know we have a lot of aspiring guitar players that listen to the podcast. What would be your sort of advice, your golden ticket advice?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's three things that I would tell every guitar player, every young guitar player to focus on right now in their career, which is first, building your chops. And with chops, that doesn't mean just sweep picking and licks and then playing chords, not just power chords. Power chords, to me, it's the most important thing. If you want to be a hard rock player, melodic rock, look at Billy Joe from Green Day, man. The guy sold 50 million records with 4 power chords, man. It's the 3 major chords and the 1 minor. That's all you need, really, if you look at it. But with that being said, so learn your guitar parts, and whatever you want to do, learn lead, learn how to bend a note in tune, and play tastefully, and I'm
still learning that one.
Yeah, well, that's hey man, there's a lot of guitar players out there and who shall remain nameless, and some of the biggest bands in the world who still can't bend a note in tune, but they've sold 100 million records, so who am I to talk? But if you can work on that. The other thing, guitar players, play to a metronome, learn to play in time, learn timing. Now, the most important thing is songwriting. Learn to write a song. I don't care how fast you can play, how many licks you can play. No one cares if you can't play in a good song. So if you want to try to make it in this business, it's all about songs. You got to learn to write songs. Then another important thing, but get yourself a Pro Tools rig, get yourself Logic, get yourself what's the other one? Cubase. Learn how to record and produce yourself. The money that I've saved in the fact that when I bought this house 26 years ago with Trixter money, and the greatest gift in the world, the first thing I did, no, I didn't go out and buy a Ferrari. No, I didn't go out and buy a Corvette. I went out and bought a recording studio, and that money has paid itself back to me 100 times over. The single most greatest investment I ever made was learning how to record myself, produce myself, so I don't have to pay other people to do it. Right there. And then the last piece of advice, the most important thing as far as I'm concerned, is all guitar players learn how to sing, and learn how to sing well, because, and Steve Lukather and numerous guitar players have said this 100 times over. I got the gig because I could sing. And I'll tell you this right now, and we'll go back to this later on. I got the Def Leppard gig. No, not because I'm a great guitar player. I got the Def Leppard gig because I can sing as good as a lead singer, sometimes better than some lead singers. So that is so important, and I think it gets overlooked. I know a lot of great guitar players, and a lot of great guitar players who are out there doing big gigs who aren't that great as singers. And if they were better singers, maybe they'd get better gigs.
Well, you know what? That is a very important thing that you say about guitar playing and singing, because it is really important in your career not to be self-conscious about your voice, because so many people that are they play an instrument, they don't feel they can sing just because, and they go, well, because I play guitar. No, you should have that confidence, and don't let any lead singer or anybody else tell you that you can't, because I'll be honest with you, no one can sing your songs unless you find that really special guy every once in a while, and they do exist, but no one can sing your songs better than you can. And
Ah,
until you find that guy, you know what? Sticks and even when you do
it's
find that
true.
guy, you'll put the harmony on that song, and that's when magic happens. When you think about those great two vocal harmonies, whether all the way from the Beatles to Oasis to, there's so every great band.
Yeah, Bon Jovi, especially John and Richie. And that was a huge influence for me growing up. I saw what those guys did and I kind of took that and I learned Richie Sambora was a huge influence on me as far as the singing guitar player aspect, because that guy, dude, let's be honest here, man. That guy is a great rock singer, better than most lead singers in bands. I played with the guy, and man, he is just beyond belief. And, so that was always my thing. And that's what I did with Trixter. All the Trixter songs, I sang those songs first and gave Pete the demos, when we used to make demos back in the day. And, that was the blueprint. And then, with him and producers or whatever, they would kind of take it to the next level. But, just what you said, no one sings your songs better than you. And, for me, that's always been sort of a sticking point, so to
But
speak.
but just looking at some of the names of guys that you have played with and some of these singers, I mean, you've worked with some incredible vocalists, and
Yes.
that's why I'm happy you have the confidence as a guitarist and a singer, because when you're playing on the same stage as guys like Eric Martin, Mr. Big, I knew Eric Martin when he was a solo artist in
Yes.
the Bay Area. That's where I grew up, and he was sort of the guy back then, even then. Dennis DeYoung, Styx, are you
Of
kidding me?
course.
I mean, Joe Lynn Turner. So these are like powerhouse vocalists that you're going on stage with. So, talking about the Def Leppard, bringing up a guy like Joe Elliott as a lead vocalist, what was he expecting you to do when you stepped into that role?
Well, the most important part, like I said, the reason I got the gig is, this goes back 30 years, friendship of those guys. I mean, I met them when I was 17 years old before Trixter got signed. Their old manager, Peter Mensch, Q Prime, was the guy who helped Trixter out, helped get our record deal. So we immediately were brought to meet the Def Leppard guys, and Phil and I hit it off. And fast forward to, 2013, Vivian got a diagnosis of cancer, and Phil was like, I got the guy. And Phil, over the years after Trixter, I had a bunch of bands that I took over lead singing in: Throwing Rocks, Soaked, 40-Foot Ringo, Stereo Fallout. And Phil was always such a great cheerleader for me and always wanted to help. And, Joe, as it turned out, was a huge fan of the 40-Foot Ringo album. And so when he knew of my voice, so as soon as Phil was like, I got the guy who could fill in for Vivian, because Vivian has to do all the high parts and the sort of, superhero vocals. Not to say that Joe doesn't do some superhero vocals with the high stuff that he's doing, but so that was it, man. And, and I say this, kind of as a funny thing, but it's very serious. Joe said to me, when we were rehearsing, we didn't really rehearse, but he said to me before the first show, he goes, I don't care what you do on your guitar tonight, but just make sure you're there for the vocals. That's Joe being the captain of the ship, and he and I went out there and I knew what I had to do. And, the great thing is with Def Leppard, those guys, that was one of my biggest influences and one of my favorite bands. Everything I do, when I'm recording, writing, producing, I have the Def Leppard Mutt Lange stamp that goes on it. And I go, what would Mutt do? What would Def Leppard do? And how does this stack up? So to get called and be a fill-in guy for Def Leppard and fill in not only for Vivian, but last year I filled in for Phil. So getting to play for both guitar players, I mean, dude, it's kind of like, for me, kind of the top of Mount Everest.
So now you know both guitar players' parts, or did you play pretty much your own stuff?
No, I had to learn. I had to play both parts, and both different parts. And, the Def Leppard stuff is not the easiest stuff in the world. And the cool thing about Def Leppard is everybody listened to it. It sounds so sweet and so perfect. But if you learn those guitar parts, let alone the vocals, it's very intricate stuff. throw into the mix singing and playing it at the same time and performing it looking like a rock star, it's not easy shoes to fill. And Phil Collin had the greatest compliment for me last year. He said, there's only one guy on earth who could do this job, and it's me. And, so, hey, man, I'll pat myself on the back for that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Getting the compliments like that is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like that album, 40-Foot Ringo, played off, because I remember that album. I remember my old bass player from Electric Angels, Jonathan Daniel. He said, he turned me on to it, gave me a CD. He said, listen to this. I think you'd like it. It's your type of music. And I call it heavy pop. It's like, it's heavy guitars, always guitar driven. But at the end of the day, you have that Cheap Trick, pop sensibility to it. And so for those of you who are listening out there, go check out 40-Foot Ringo. Obviously, go check out anything that's in Steve Brown's sort of discography. And we'll probably talk about your newest stuff in just a little bit. But I want to talk about a couple other bands because I know these guys as well. And I'm going to be seeing them this weekend. So, and I know you're tight with them, the Danger Boys. How about that?
Yes, my brothers, of course, man. Ted, Steve, and Bruno, and Rob, and everybody, Paul Lane, everybody in the Danger family. And I think that's actually how we met, kind of. I remember I think we met officially the first time when Throwing Rocks opened up for Alice Cooper at Jones Beach in 1996, I think it was, on the Scorpions Alice Cooper tour.
First tour, that was
Yeah, and I remember you came in the dressing room, man, and you were like, and that was Throwing Rocks was a complete departure from Trixter. I wasn't even playing guitar in that band, but it was very cool. And so the Danger guys go back to, we met them. I've known Ted since 1987, 86. He was a Jersey guy. Yeah. Ted Poley, lead singer. And and we were friends early on, right before Danger, when he was a drummer in the band Prophet in New Jersey, which was a fabulous, killer New Jersey band. And then with Ted, I met Steve and Bruno, and a great story about, how I almost was maybe the guitar player in Danger was, we were all backstage, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, Giant Stadium, New Jersey tour, 1989. And we were all backstage, and Ted brings me over to Steve, and he goes, oh, you got to meet Steve West. And, he goes to me, he goes, man, we're looking for a guitar player for Danger. You should be the guitar player. And he goes to me, man, mark my words, in a year you'll be driving a Ferrari. And I was like, wow, man, those are pretty strong words. But, I had Trixter going. So, we were kind of right behind Danger as far as getting a deal. And it didn't work out. But, some 30 years later, here we are playing together again.
If you would have just dyed your hair blonde that 1 week, man, I'm telling you, you would have been in Danger. And had an oversized baseball cap, you would have been in like Flynn. But you know what? It pays off because look at where you're talking from now. The studio that Trixter built and the one that you've maintained throughout the years of making records. This is where I'm interviewing right now. As you can see it's the ultimate man cave. Of course, I'm in my son's room. I'm in my son's room. He's in his man cave.
Yeah.
And
it's all good. Whatever works.
Steve West is somewhere with his parents right now. Where's he at? His parents' house. I love Steve. I told the guys in Danger that I'd give a big shout out, about them when I was talking to you today. So.
Oh man,
what's going on? Are you guys, because you're not at Sweden Rock this year playing with them, but they're doing something over in the States, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't really know what the full story is, but a couple years ago I filled in again. That's kind of my thing, filling in last minute. Bruno, my good friend Bruno, my neighbor, he lives in Jersey now, so he's 2 towns over. He calls me up. He said, "Dude, can you learn 14 songs by Friday?" And I'm like, "For you guys, of course, I'll do anything." And And, again, it was one of those things to where, I was a huge fan of Danger Danger all throughout their career, loved their records. But until I started learning their material, like Def Leppard, I didn't realize, again, you listen to it, it sounds so simple and easy. But, man, their stuff and Bruno and Steve really wrote some incredible songs with some real depth and tricky parts. And I tell Bruno and Steve all the time, I'm like, man, fuck you guys for writing these stupid, the way they would change riffs around. But, Bruno had a great saying about it, man. He said, hey, man, I just want my stuff to be a little bit different than everybody. And I go like, man, I would never do that. Why you got to be so tricky with stuff? And it's cool, man. And everybody.
You were the band called Trixter, man.
I know, right? But I get that, dude, I get that when people try to learn my stuff. They go, dude, some of your stuff is really tricky, but it's my stuff. Like when you write songs, it's your sort of boxes and shapes that you're used to. Yeah. So when you learn other people's stuff, to them, it's simple. But for me, it's like, man, I stumble on the weirdest stuff with these bands, But
I get asked that about playing and making that record with Slash's Snake Pit, because everyone says, well, what's it like to play with Slash? I said, well, the cool thing about Slash is that he has his own time signature, and that's why his riff sounds so original.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He has his own. That's why him and Steven Adler worked so well together on Appetite, because one was pushing, one would push, the other would pull, and it was constantly almost falling off the tracks, but just enough for you to be really interested. So when I was writing songs with Snake Pit, I remember he would come in with these riffs that, to me, almost seemed like they were out of time or off time, but I realized really quickly that no, they're exactly in his time signature. He does a lot of things on the upbeat and a lot of things on the and of four.
Sure.
And those are all just things that you just take it for granted when it's part of what your playing style is. But when you listen to it from somebody else's perspective, it's completely different.
It is, man. And yeah, and by the way, I love that first Slash record that you did with him, man. I love that. You and Dover. Just killer.
That's the second one.
What?
They did Ain't Life Grand was the album that I did on it, and they did It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere. But it's weird because Dover and I ended up playing together in Alice Cooper. Gilby Clarke and I, as you know, have a huge long history. So it is kind of, I guess we're the West Coast version of the Brady Bunch of rock and a lot of the musicians playing together over there. Totally. And you have the East Coast version of that,
Yeah, I think, and that's really cool. And what's funny is when we all get together, we're all like brothers. We don't see each other, but we all speak sort of the same language because we all grew up together. And it's like, that's the really cool thing about it. So,
When I hear you talk about the upbringing, the bands, the types of bands that you played with, and the types of bands that you were influenced by, it's very similar to my upbringing as well. I'm curious, man, I want to bring up one other guy because a lot of people think, oh, he's a comedian, he's not a singer, but this guy's a singer. Jim Breuer you actually played with, right?
Yes, yeah, Jim Breuer, man.
Goat Boy. You played with Goat Boy, but Goat Boy has a hell of a metal voice, right?
Oh, he's a killer singer, great guy. We've been friends for a long time, and last year he called me to put together a little band. So I brought in PJ Farley and Joey Casada, my guys who we play with Eric Martin. That's the core of the Eric Martin and the Filthy Tricksters band, that we go out and do that with. And but Jim called me, and he called me when he did his solo record a couple years ago. The Loud and Rowdy that he did, and he sent it to me, and I was blown away. I was like, man, I knew he was a good singer because of his impressions. Of course, his AC/DC is just incredible, but the guy really is a great singer. And first and foremost, he's just a huge fan. He just loves metal, but his impressions have really, it's just turned into like what he really is. Like he just loves that stuff. And so we put this band together to kind of accompany his live show. And it's been a blast, and we're really not doing stuff. He kind of changed his show around, but how much fun did we have doing that? All we did was laugh the whole time. It was like we'd go to rehearsal, and I'd come home, and my body hurt, not from playing, but from laughing.
That reminds me of like a Tenacious D type of guy, like Jack Black. Is this like the way he is such a passionate fan, but he can actually sing and perform, and he brings it. So they're another band I'm going to check out this week, and it's festival weekend here in Sweden. You should take a flight over, man. We'll surprise
I
you.
would
Danger.
love to. I would love to. And Def Leppard's going to be there, I think, tomorrow. And, and Kiss. And I think Joel Turner and Skid Row were playing tonight. So it's like,
Basically your whole resume.
I know, right? You go there, right? And the Skid Row guys, dude, they go back. I met the Skid Row guys back when they had their old singer back in 1986, right when I met, the great Jack Ponte, and all these guys from Jersey. Everybody, all of us, when we get together, it's crazy, and some of these guys I don't see for 5-10 years. But when we do see each other, it's like we were together yesterday. And that's the cool thing about our, brotherhood that we have.
Well, I mean, friendships run deep. Guitars run even deeper sometimes.
Yes,
all right.
Sure.
And that's why. And are there any of those same guitars that you jammed with back in the Trixter days, or any of the bands that you played with over the years? Did you still have that go-to guitar? Because I see there's a couple around you in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, I don't have any of the go-tos. My main guitars back in the Trixter days are long gone. I do have a funny story. My first real good guitar, which was it was the cheapo Ibanez Iceman, but there's pictures of me playing it. That was the one that I used when Trixter started getting momentum till I got my first Charvel guitar back in the day, back in 1985 or 86. But my childhood friend still has it, and he fucking won't sell it back to me. So I'm gunning for you.
The Iceman was the Paul Stanley sort of signature model. And I remember one of my first guitars, my very, very first guitar, I ended up trading with a bunch of other guitars for this one humbucker pickup guitar, which was an Ibanez Destroyer, which is basically a copy of a Explorer. So they had the Explorer in candy apple red or blue, and I think they had the Iceman. Was it only black, or was that the Paul Stanley model?
I think I had a black one. Which then I put on some tape to sort of Van Halenize it, But yeah, I mean, I'm just, typically, man. And here's, this is my main rock, the Eddie Van Halen, Wolfgang. These are the guitars that basically I was always locking tremolo guy. I got my FU tone bridge, and this has been my guitar, the Van Halen styles guitars, and I've been endorsed through Eddie for the last 30 years since he was with Peavey and even Music Man back in the day. So those are my go-tos, that type of guitar. But, I over the years, man, it's just been a plethora, and I have a bunch of different tools that I use in the studio. And I told you the other day, I just got this new Solar guitar with an Evertune bridge on it, which, Solar is a sweet, Ola England is a Swedish guy. And these guitars are just awesome. I've been using it in the studio for rhythm tracks. It's just, the Evertune bridge, perfect intonation everywhere.
It never goes out of tune. It really doesn't.
It's incredible, man. Saves me hours of having to sit there, when you're doing the high overdubs, doing like jangly stuff, how you used to have to like tune your guitar for just that part and punch in. I don't have to do any of that shit anymore. Thanks to Bruno Ravel for that, because he's the one who's been telling me for 8 years dude, you got to get an Evertune guitar. You trust me. And I get the hype now.
Nice.
Yeah,
well, I see, as far as the amps go, I'm a Marshall traditionalist, but I see the EVH right behind you.
Oh,
Is Eddie Van Halen? What the 5150 amps? Is that the ones that you use?
Yeah. That's the, I've used all the ones from back, the Peavey days, and now, of course, the new, the 5153s. That's just my thing. It's kind of like people ask me my style, and it's like, just kind of take Van Halen and put my thing. Maybe combine Van Halen, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi. You got my sort of playing style. Neil Schon, little more, thematic and melodic, and that's what I'm looking at. So these amps have just been my, forte for years, and just get me that sound that I love, and And
you know how to dial it up. You work with it in the studio.
Yeah.
Well, your man cave / studio.
Yeah.
What about these recordings that you have been doing in your house? Are you working on anything new right now? Is there something coming up in the pipeline? What's happening?
Yeah. I'm actually right now. I'm full in the trenches. Here's all my notes for the new Tokyo Motor Fist records for Frontiers Records. It's kind of a super group. No, it is a super group, if you will.
Who's in it?
It's my good buds, Ted Poley from Danger Danger's lead vocalist, Greg Smith, who I think you know, Greg Smith on bass.
Of course.
The great, he's in Ted Nugent. I think he played with you and Alice for a little while.
Toured together.
Yep,
and I was there when he got his bass clef tattoo.
There you go.
Designed by Calico Cooper. Not a lot of people know it, but he was. I still remember it was Salt Lake City, and everybody had a couple cocktails afterwards, was feeling really good. And this was the days before, when everybody was getting a tattoo. Everyone needed a tattoo. So I think the same night, Calico got a tramp stamp, and
I love it.
And I don't know actually what the Chinese symbol actually means. It might mean something different than what was actually said it would mean. And then Greg was going, well, I don't know what to get. And I remember Calico just going, bass clef. And he's like, yeah, bass clef. I played bass. That would be a good tattoo.
Yeah.
And so there, if you ever want to see Calico Cooper's tattoo artistry, check out Greg Smith's. I think it's on his arm. I hope it's on his arm. Where else is the bass clef?
With Greg, you never have any idea where it could be. But
you got Ted and Greg, and who else in the band?
And the great Chuck Bergy on drums, who was the famous Chuck Bergy, who's my neighbor. He lives, it's funny where I am in Jersey. I got Chuck is 2 towns over up more north, and Bruno Ravel's 2 towns further south from me. So yeah, we got a great little area up here in northern New Jersey. But yeah, Chuck, from Rainbow, and now he's Billy Joel's drummer, and he's also the drummer of Tokyo Motor Fist. And, he's been a lifelong friend of mine, for a long time. I met Chuck when I was a little kid, when I would hang out at Sam Ash in Paramus, New Jersey, the music store. And I would wait for Jolyn Turner and Chuck Bergy to come in and from their breaks on the Rainbow tour. And every once in a while I'd see them there, and I was probably 12 or 13 then, man. And I'd go up and tug on there. Hey, aren't you Jolyn Turner? Aren't you Chuck Bergy? And here I am playing with these guys now. So we have a great new band, Tokyo Motor Fist. We put out a record 2 years ago that was, had a tremendous response, great melodic hard rock record. So we're working on the second one right now.
Okay, so when can we expect, in 2019 or 2020?
2020, probably first quarter of 2020, and can't wait. It's been a really cool thing. And, the cool thing about Tokyo Motor Fist is, like a lot of these, records from these bands that are so-called supergroups, they never play live. We're a real band that we played a couple shows. We've done a couple festivals. We're doing the Monsters of Rock cruise in February of 2020. And it's a real band as much as it can be. And of course the camaraderie and the humor is there. And I think
that's the necessity. That is a requirement in any band today, because that was one thing that I was talking with Phil X from Bon Jovi, and he was saying, I was asking him that same question. What's the most thing about guitar and business? If you can give us some sort of special golden advice. And he'd say, have a sense of humor, comedy, when you're on the road, because that's so important to hang.
Of course it is. Of course it is. That's, and man, from being out on tour and, when you travel with people, being in a band is just not about playing and how great you are on stage, what great songs you write. It's about how you get along with each other, because besides those 2 hours on stage, there's another 22 hours, that you got to be together. I don't know how much you sleep or whatnot, but that's a lot of time on a tour bus. So the personal angle and humor, Phil X, I love that guy because he has such a great sense of humor. That's why we get along so good every time we hang out, because we don't really talk about guitars. We're talking about jokes and quoting movies, and the same thing, Joe Elliott, another guy, Def Leppard, one of the funniest guys. And all we do movie references, Caddyshack, and, all the time, Spinal Tap, the movie references, and we just laugh. And that's what gets you through the day a lot of the time.
A lot of people don't know what a knowledgeable rock and roll guy Joe Elliott is. He knows all about that early 70s glam
Oh,
rock and roll. He knew everything about Alice Cooper, his discography. He even knew the stuff that, when I was playing with Alice, when I first joined, we did The Eyes of Alice Cooper and Dirty Diamonds. He knew all about those records. So hats off to him. He really knows his stuff when it comes to bands.
Joe is like beyond comprehension. I remember, Phil telling me, a story a couple years ago, which I thought was great. When they went to see Queen, I think it was on the Works tour, and they were backstage, and all of a sudden Joe went up to Freddie Mercury and started talking to him about some, I don't know what it was. I think it was like some B-sides or even some early recordings that Freddie did before he was even in Queen. And all of a sudden, the next thing Phil said, the next thing you know, Freddie took Joe into his dressing room and they were just talking about, all these offshoot bands. Joe knows everything about every British band that there is. And anytime I find out, about a new band, like I just, found out about the sensational Alex Harvey band, like I never knew about. And I'm kind of going back. And I anytime there's a band, I text Joe and I go, dude, do you know these guys? What should I listen to? He goes, do I know them? That's my favorite band. And then the next thing you know, he emails me a playlist, whether it's the Alex Harvey band, the Tubes, all these bands that like I didn't really know about, but I'm learning about now. He's like the encyclopedia for that.
I hope some of you guys that are listening out there, guys and gals listening, be writing this stuff down. Sensational Alex Harvey Band is a great. If you want to find out where, I guess, Bon Scott maybe got a little bit of his attitude and a little bit of his vibe from, everything comes from something. Don't ever forget that. But check out a little bit of Midnight Moses from Sensational Alex Harvey Band.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, totally. That's the cool thing, and that was always my biggest thing, later on after, but probably in the late 80s, early 90s, when I, after being such a fan of, whether it's Van Halen or whatever, then I would get into the deep history, which is another thing for all the listeners and viewers out there. When you love a band, go back to see what they were influenced by. And one of the coolest things is I found out Van Halen, Eddie and Alex especially, were such huge fans of Grand Funk Railroad. Mark Farner, that was the band that they like kind of modeled themselves after, and then when I heard that, I went back and discovered Grand Funk Railroad. And if you listen to Foot Stompin' Music by Grand Funk Railroad, it's So This Is Love by Van Halen. Boop-ba-cha, boop-ba-cha. Where did you get that from? And then I learned from Carmine Appice that Cactus was a huge influence on Van Halen. Parchment Farm, where'd you get that from? And I was like, man, I thought Van Halen invented this stuff, but it was an influence. And so then you learn all these things. And then one cool thing was I got all these bootleg videos. I'm a huge bootleg video collector. I got these Grand Funk Railroad things. I told Eddie Van Halen about it. He's like, while he was smoking his cigarette, he goes, you got that video of Grand Funk at the LA Forum in 1970? He's like, here's my FedEx number. Send that to the house. And here I am fucking sending Eddie Van Halen, pro shot bootleg videos. I'm like, this is fucking cool, man. I'm sending Eddie Van Halen Grand Funk Railroad videos. So yeah, that's a cool thing.
Absolutely, man. And it's a great way to get in with one of your heroes too. You send him something that he's truly interested in. He's going to be your pal now.
Well, that was the great story about Joe and Freddie Mercury, and sadly for me, I never got to see Queen or got to see Freddie Mercury live, but I did get to go see Queen in 2014 when I was with Def Leppard out at the LA Forum. And, I had met Brian May, back when he was doing his solo tour, I think in 1992 or 93, when we were opening for Kiss, we were at a truck stop together when him and Cozy Powell were in the Shoney's or whatever the truck stop was. I remember somebody going, holy shit, Brian May's in there. I'm like, what? And ran in. And so fast forward to 2014 when I got to go see Queen with Adam Lambert, and, just an incredible thing. So, that's a great thing. Yeah. Bonding with your heroes over their influences, and Joe's always been great like that.
Well, next time we got you on the podcast, next we're going to bring you down. We'll go more in depth to those guys, and we'll see who we have run across on our travels since this conversation.
Totally.
So, Steve, thanks for coming in the trenches with us. It's been great getting to know more about your history, getting to know more about all the incredible sort of musicians that you played with. You've definitely been in the trenches. You've definitely paid your dues, but it's definitely paid off for you. And like I said, what's the best way for our listeners to check you out if they want to find out more about you and find out more about your music?
Just I'm on Twitter, Steve Brown Rocks, and Instagram, man. I'm not really a big social media guy like some of you cats out there, as I should be, but that's it, man. And check it out. I'm playing in my grade 80s band a lot on the East Coast, Rubik's Cube, and what do I got coming up? I got a couple shows with Dennis DeYoung in July, and you never know what else. A couple Eric Martin band shows coming up in July, and and that's it. And just working on the Tokyo Motor Fist record, and taking care of my family and enjoying life, dude. As I tell everybody, I'm one of the luckiest guys on earth. Every dream I ever had came true 100 times over. Here I am talking to you from my basement in New Jersey via Stockholm, Sweden. So how cool is that, man?
One last question.
I
came up with my name, Ryan Roxie. How the hell did you come up with a stage name like Steve Brown? Where did you get that, man? Where did you get Steve Brown? Like, what happened? Where did the stars one?
It pretty much, yeah. It's one of those things, where it's a lot of thinking. It's either going to be something like Steve Sinister or something like that. But here's a funny story, man. People come up to me, and honestly, Steve Brown is my God-given name. It's on my birth certificate. It's on my license. It's everywhere. It's no joke, okay? But I actually have people who come up to me, Steve Brown, is that your stage name? And I go, no way. No, I'm like, it's my real name. I said, if I was going to have a stage name, I would change my name to something like Bobby Vellante or something cool, but I guess Steve Brown is a pretty cool name. And
you could always go with John Smith.
Yeah, there you go. John Smith. Yeah, Bob White. It doesn't get any more, any more, simple than that. But yeah, that's my name, and God bless it.
Sticking to it. Yeah,
it's working. That's my stage name. Yeah.
Steve, thanks for coming on In the Trenches, man. And hold on for just 1 second. I want to talk to you a little bit, but I'm going to stop the recording, and let all the other listeners go about do what they got to do. But in the meantime, we'll see you next time in the trenches. Thank you for watching the pod. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And you know how to get in touch with us. Just check out all the information that's on the description below. And we will see you next time on In the Trenches. Ryan Roxie, enjoy the ride.
In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.